My short story is entitled Worth, but I won't tell you too much about it before I read it because something I enjoy doing while reading fiction books is figuring out the meaning of a story for myself. The year was 2094. The date was November the 21st, and the United States of America's #1 detective, Clint Ryder, was on the magnetic levitation train on his way to solve yet another mystery. The famous investigator was average height but fairly skinny and had a mass of untidy jet black hair that tried to hide a scar that ran across one of his chocolate-colored eyes. He wore a black, worn trench coat on top of all of his outfits and sported a backpack of equipment and his eye lenses, a pair of smart glasses that replaced the ancient iPhones. The private eye worked in Detroit, so he was getting almost as many calls from his area as he did other states. In fact, one of these calls was what had him in the maglev right then, but he was not looking forward to this case. Clint had already checked the files for the case, and the crook involved was one of the most unpredictable felons he had ever faced. The person's identity was a mystery, but they had successfully robbed several banks, museums, and other notable places, and Clint had spent the past years trying to catch the felon, along with almost every other high-end detective in the world. However, Clint had always failed, and the inspector was not sure if this would be the case that put down his career, especially since the public called the thief the untouchable. On top of that, Clint was paired with another detective on this case, and nothing made Clint more upset than having to work with others. Not only did they normally get in the way of whatever he did, but they often got too attached to the case. Clint had learned a long time ago that if you ever got too attached to something, you would just get let down or backstabbed. A good detective knew that things like love or emotions got in the way of a case. Next up, South Carolina. A speaker overhead on Clint's cabin buzzed, "All who are taking this stop on the Daybreak Maglev, please gather your belongings and prepare to exit." Clint made sure his eye lenses were on, grabbed his backpack, and headed out the opening bay doors of the train. The crowd was fairly large, and Clint was having to push by people who were talking with family or chatting with friends. Some even seemed to be getting to know complete strangers, which was something Clint had not experienced for himself in a very long time. A funeral scene and a gravestone flashed through Clint's head all too quickly, and he quickly brought himself under control before he lost hold on his emotions. He checked his text messages and saw that the fellow detective he was working with, apparently named Alan Blanc, had asked him to meet at an Italian restaurant known as Pisano's. Clint looked around the town to call for a robo-taxi, but he did not see a single one in sight. Sighing, Clint decided he had to take the long way and headed down the road at a fast pace. Clint arrived at the spot where Alan had asked to meet him, and he was slightly shocked. Clint had noticed this about most of the town, but the building for this restaurant would not have been out of the ordinary even all the way back in 2019. He walked into Pisano's and was pleasantly surprised at the waitress's kindness. Clint figured either Detroit's high crime rate deterred people's capabilities of hospitality, or his no-emotions demeanor scared everyone at home off. Clint found Alan waiting at a table for two. The other detective was very tall and had stark red hair, although not a lot of it, and he wore a button-up with khaki pants. The big man looked up and saw Clint approaching and beckoned him forward. "My golly, if it isn't Clint Ryder," Alan chuckled and shook hands with Clint. "Can't believe you're here to help. Really appreciate it." "Look," Clint declared in an exasperated tone, "if our John Doe really is here in this little town of Seneca, we don't have time for pleasantries. Just tell me what you know." Alan's face straightened. "You're right," he replied. "I've got a wife and kids to keep safe, and with that villain running loose..." Clint cut Alan off with a wave of his hand. "We don't have time for you to focus on your family life, Mr. Blanc. You need to keep your loved ones and your emotions under control, or..." The funeral scene and more flooded into Clint's head again, and he was petrified in the middle of his sentence with the overwhelming feelings of despair, anger, and more so, loss. He was remembering too much, not keeping his emotions in the box they belonged in, like he should have done all those years ago. "Or what?" Alan asked, bringing Clint out of his dark memories. "You'll be one sloppy detective," Clint burst. "Just go ahead and tell me what you know." Much to Clint's frustration, a waitress came in and took his and Alan's orders, interrupting the latter's much-desired information. After the orders were placed, Allen started filling Clint on why he was brought to South Carolina. As you know, Allen stated, in the year 2045, the massive Preston diamond was found in Walhalla, a neighboring city, and it weighed to be around 7,051.88 carats and was, and is, the most valuable stone to have ever existed. Well, yesterday we received intel that the untouchable was heading in this direction, and we believe the diamond is the most likely target. So, while we have the diamond under protection, we wanted you down here to analyze the untouchable's most likely plan of attack and help us devise a way to put the criminal behind bars. I'll be glad to put that evil rat back in his rightful place, Clint mused. When do we start? Tomorrow, Allen gushed. Until then, check in at a hotel and enjoy some rest, Mr. Ryder. For tomorrow, we end a crook. Clint was walking up to the front desk of a hotel nearby the restaurant, and the sun was making its home in the horizon, causing the sky to turn shades of wonderful purples and pinks. As Clint was walking by, he saw a sign labeling that this hotel was not far from the museum that stored the Preston diamond. Smiling at his luck, Clint proceeded to go into the hotel. As he entered the hotel, he, out of habit, looked around for any possible threats. Much to his pleasure, he did not notice anything that was out of the ordinary and proceeded to the front desk. However, there his sense of security was completely shattered. The lady at the reception area looked at him and gave him a pleasant smile. "How may I help you this fine evening?" she asked. "Well," Clint replied, "I'd like to pay for one night, please. Name's Clint Ryder." The receptionist looked down at her list and gave Clint a quizzical look. "Mr. Ryder," she asked, puzzled, "would you be part of the Ryder family that already checked in?" Clint nearly had a heart attack, but calmed himself, thinking of how common a last name like Ryder could be. "I don't believe so," he stammered. "Could you read me the names of the people on the party?" "Well," the receptionist remarked, "the list says that there are 3 people, but only 2 by the name of Ryder." She paused and held up a yellow sticky note. "Oh, it seems I forgot. It seems they were expecting a Clint Ryder to come in. It's room 135, 3rd story," the lady finished, tossing him a pair of room keys. His heart pounded like a beating drum as he walked to the elevator and went up to the 3rd floor. If they were here, then they were in serious danger. The Untouchable was a dangerous criminal, and Clint had shut them out of his life for a reason. He wouldn't be able to live with himself if he lost one of his own loved ones to the Untouchable. Not again. The elevator was almost to the top floor when the full barrage of memories hit Clint like a hurricane of pain and suffering. Clint was naive back then, letting his family into his life when he had such a dangerous job. He was chasing the Untouchable in a rainstorm, trying to stop the criminal's first crime. He was rounding an alley corner, and the villain was firing bullets into the crowd. A flash of lightning revealed the Untouchable firing his gun at Clint's grandmother. And the so-called great detective of Detroit could not stop one of his loved ones from dying. He could not bear for another one of his family dying, or one of his friends meeting an early end due to him. And as Clint opened the door to room 135, he thought of how if the people in the room were who he thought they were, this case would be 3 times harder. Clint opened the door to reveal his father, mother, and ex-best friend, all of whom were looking at him with dark expressions. "Clint," his friend stressed, "we need to talk." Clint turned a ghostly pale and sputtered a reply. "No, we do not. The most dangerous criminal I've ever faced is in this very town, Will, and all of you are at risk because you know me. I'm not putting you at risk just so we can feel a feeling called love." Clint's dad gave his son a glare. "Kid," the father retorted, "some people are worth loving no matter how much pain they can be risked getting in. If you always avoid a relationship because someone could get harmed, then you'll never connect with anyone in your life. There's always pain in relationships. That's just the way things have been since the fall. But if you truly love someone, you'll be willing to do so no matter what could happen to you or them. And I'm sorry I didn't tell you that earlier, but when I heard you were coming down here," tears were in both of the men's eyes now, and father and son both hugged. Clint's mother piped in now. "I'm glad to see the 2 of you are getting along. And Clint, you'll be getting a text soon from—" But Clint's mother never got to finish her sentence because the lights in the room popped off unexpectedly. Clint grabbed his family and friend and shoved them down into a corner. He then activated one of the advanced, normally illegal, programs on his eye lenses, and the lights in the room flickered back on after Clint finished hacking the backup power generator. A figure dressed from head to toe in all black appeared, holding a tied hostage by the hair. Clint's ex-girlfriend won't be sending any apology text, the Untouchable jeered, because she's tied up right here, and I'll shoot her if you so as much tase me. Clint frowned heavily and stared down the crook. So it wasn't the diamond you were after. The Untouchable laughed and must have been smiling under his black mask. Well, the Preston diamond is a nice extra, but what I'm after here is the ending of the career of the only threat to my evil streak. You. Clint kept a calm expression, not letting the Untouchable realize that he was sending an emergency text to Alan Blanc via his eye lenses. So I'm guessing that you have some diabolical scheme planned with a hard choice for me to make? The Untouchable chuckled yet again, and Clint started to think the laugh was familiar. You're one smart goody two-shoes, Clint, the Untouchable sneered. In fact, I do. I've got men positioned right outside the Preston Diamonds Museum right now. Either you go save the diamond at the cost of these 4 people, and the public considers you a heartless animal despite you catching me, and nobody will accept your services thereof, or you let me and my crew escape, and you get to keep your family, but you willingly let me go, giving you your biggest failure, and again, the outcome is your career as a detective getting a pink slip. Clint chuckled. Well, I think you've got me, and at that moment the detective sent the message to the number Alan had given him. A moment later, a faint buzz emanated from inside the Untouchable's mask, and the forgetting to turn off the ringer on a pair of eye lenses cracked the biggest mystery known to the 21st century. Clint, not waiting for the Untouchable to react, threw a punch that cracked against the thief's jaw, sending the gun flying, the hostage crawling, and the Untouchable crumpling. Clint leapt over the weapon and, on top of the crook, set his taser to the man's chest and yanked off the mask to reveal Alan Blanc in the outfit of the Untouchable. Clint took his turn to laugh. So that's how you've been doing it all, Clint taunted. You've been inside the system this whole time, probably botching our information and stealing our secrets so you could get away with almost everything. Then all you had to do to end the one person in your way of a crime monopoly is to lure him down with the promise of catching the thing I wanted most, and you threatened the family I isolated to protect ever since you shot and killed my grandmother. In fact, I bet you're the one who brought them down here in the first place. Alan groaned. You're too blasted good, Clint. You are the best detective ever, and you made me and my fellow detectives look bad. Couldn't handle that. And the Untouchable was the only way it could tarnish your reputation, and it worked. Until now, Alan, Clint interrupted and slapped a pair of handcuffs on his arch nemesis's hands, and he looked over at those he had rejected for the past years. And in a way, thanks to you, I've learned that some people are worth the pain in life.